Hello, my YouTube friends. I am back again, and I'm here to talk about games. It's been a long while, or at least it's been a long while since the last video, depending on when you watch this. But we are back on that horse, making content that you love, or at least love to like. You gotta like it, no? I mean, if you don't, then I don't really know what you're doing, and I can't control you either way, so whatever. Today, we're going to talk about a small little indie game I played this year, and I can't think of a better way to usher myself back into a kind of like normal-ish content schedule, or at least usher myself back into something. I don't even know what month it is, honestly. What is it, like December or something? November? Whatever it is. I don't know. So, sit down, either way, relax with me for a few minutes. You don't got much going on, at least I hope you don't. I know holidays are coming up. You're going to subscribe, right? Right? I don't know. Maybe grab a snack or two, do something. I'm not requiring much here beyond maybe some of your time, which I suppose is just as valuable as anything else. So maybe it is a lot to ask. Hey, the game we are talking about deals with time, and I think that's rather neat. And I didn't even plan it that way. Can you believe that? I'm sorry, we need to move on. I keep talking way too much. But I'm gonna talk some more now. Unsighted is one of those video games that has a spectacular premise, some alluring art, themes, and even a lot of creativity that comes out of every corner of the screen. But it goes largely unnoticed in a lot of mainstream circles, so I'm here to tell you why you shouldn't forget about this game, or why it deserves some of your time and attention. Now, I saw this game being talked about, or at least heard about it here and there online, and read about it, and even heard it mentioned on a few podcasts and other videos, and it sounded intriguing enough to get me to buy it and play it. Unsighted is about these automatons created by humans to do their bidding, and as such they slowly gain the ability of free thought and expression. A war had broken out prior to the game starting between the automatons and the humans, where they fought over a precious resource, anima, of which the automatons run on. The automatons want this resource to grow and to thrive so they can choose their own destinies and path. The humans want to use it for their own purposes. You play as Alma, one of these automatons fighting to restore the amount of anima spreading to the rest of the planet, as well as trying to buy yourself and others time to get there. And that's kind of the thing that draws you in from the get-go. The application of this idea that everyone in this game, in the world, has an hourly timer on them. Even the little companion, the little fairy companion that travels with you. And when it runs out, they die. Or they go unsighted. At the risk of ruining the views on this video, I would add that at this point, if any of that intrigued you of what I just talked about, maybe watch a little further. If it's enough for you to check out, maybe stop and then go and play it. I almost feel like talking about it any more than I just did could ruin it, so stop here, go and play it if you don't want to hear more. Otherwise, it's a very daring and bold idea, to be honest. I don't know how else to describe it. Sure, you can give them a resource known as meteor dust to give them a little bit more time, but that is finite. It's a finite resource. And you really can't save everyone. And that sold me right away. This application of a story idea and to have it connect in some way to the gameplay. Mind you, you can turn this feature off in explore mode and play the game more casually with less stakes, but it's not a long game, and if you decide to take that plunge, I almost advise you to leave that feature on, even if it's just for a first playthrough, because every second you spend in game just carries more weight with the knowledge that time is literally ticking. Now, to be clear about this feature so it doesn't scare you away, it is not nearly as punishing as you think it is. All it really adds to the game, in my opinion, is a way to propel you forward, to make you a little bit more urgent in your tasks. But it's not that punishing. It's not going to make you think that every time you went up to use the bathroom or something that everyone's gone. That's not exactly how it works. It's just more about moving you forward and pushing you to that end. Now, the story itself I found rather moving and even interesting. Now, overall, I don't know if the game quite sticks that landing, but what you'll find here is a cute but dark tale of robots just running out of time and fearing they'll lose themselves and even each other in the process of trying to find a way out of their current predicament. I do have some nitpicks in terms of execution of the story in comparison to how it's set up, and you do have limited time. It just doesn't quite nail that setup, at least in my eyes. I also never really felt super compelled to follow through with anybody's requests of me, at least immediately, because I was so dead set on making sure I got this story quick enough for everyone or as many people as possible to survive, though that is a minor complaint and nitpick, and in the end you have a story of love and loss and living on borrowed time. Alma, the player character, also has an hour timer on her as you play, and it felt like they deliberately had hers decline just slightly slower than others to obviously be more forgiving for you as the player and give you ample time to respond if you notice that she's kind of ticking down on the hour clock. But it makes everything, as I already said, have that weight to it that It otherwise wouldn't have, it didn't have this. This is gonna be a weird poll, and I guess I apologize in advance. This is gonna be a very weird poll. But remember that Nickelback music video? You know what I'm talking about, where Chad Kroeger walks around and everyone has a timer above their head, and if it reaches the 0, they just fucking die? Exactly. Unsighted is like Nickelback, except nothing like it beyond this brief comparison I just made. I'm sorry though, just brief aside, can we just acknowledge that Nickelback, despite all the hate, does have some bangers? I mean, come on. If Everyone Cared, Photograph, Saving Me, you know, the others. The other aspect of this game that I think really drew me in about it, and I say think because I don't know if I just lately have this affinity for this small, like little Zelda-like games. Example, I have also played and platinumed Death's Door. Great game, by the way. And I was rather taken in by it. Unsighted is no different. It's more in the vein of a Metroidvania, I would say, but it obviously has those inspirations and even a little bit of a Souls type of energy. You hit these terminals that are like checkpoints, and when you die, you get bolts or currency you use to buy literally everything else in the game. When you die, you lose bolts, or at least a portion of them on easier difficulties. While dying is not as much of a penalty as it is in a Souls game, it does seem to push forward the clock, which could prove detrimental to some of the characters that you meet. Now, as I mentioned before, I do really like this little mechanic because it does add a little bit of a layer of challenge. But again, it's not too punishing. For example, if you have chips, you can purchase more slots to provide buffs for Alma. I do really like this little mechanic because it does add a bit of a Souls-like element to it. It adds a layer of challenge, but again, it's not too punishing. For example, if you have chips, you can purchase more slots to provide buffs for Alma. Think like damage bonuses, speed bonuses, more like stamina and health, and even the ability to not lose bolts upon death. It all complements each other, and you can create some wild builds with the different chipsets. I think I had one where you can just kind of make it so Alma's like jump attack is so insanely powerful that you don't even need to worry about other phases of bosses. You can just kind of wipe them out entirely, and that's something that comes with later in the game when you could duplicate these items and these chipsets. But it's pretty awesome, just different ways you can build out your character and build out Alma. So in that respect, I do appreciate the level of customizability that you have in your chipsets. And like a Souls game, it becomes a game of you making these constant decisions on whether you continue forward or go back and upgrade some weapons and get different chips. You're always balancing these things. I really enjoyed that as I raced against the clock. Picture it like making popcorn. It's popping, and you realize you need to use the little boys room. You make that judgment call. Do you pee now while it's cooking, or do you wait and risk that microwavable popcorn being stale and old by the time you get back to it? Unsighted is like that, but I guess the results are not as tangible because it's not popcorn, and also it does happen in a fictional game world, so. Slash, parry, shoot, and zip around the map. There's so many ways to play this game, and it makes for a more customizable experience, as I mentioned before, with your character. Maybe you build your character to output tons of damage immediately, like I mentioned earlier. Maybe you want to parry and do critical hits, or maybe you want to sweep rooms with your shotgun. You're always doing the same thing, but in the span of what it's like a 10-hour game, there's enough variety that you'll settle on a playstyle eventually, or maybe you'll look up a different build and try to figure out, how can I just maximize my damage output, like I said before, and just ignore boss battles entirely. And when you know that they're going to get into another phase, you just have a way of getting around that. There's plenty of puzzles also, and if you hate puzzles, it's not anything that's too difficult or complex or elaborate. I consider myself a big dumb dummy, so I'm very grateful for that, because with puzzles for me, it's like you have about 5 to 10 minutes of my time, and if I can't grapple with it or begin to figure it out after that point, I'm just gonna look it up. I mean, I just recently played the original Uncharted game, and the original Uncharted games, I should say in general, like all of them, and I just couldn't do it sometimes, so I would just be like, all right, I'm gonna look this up. But that being said, these puzzles are not that intense, so I want to get back to the parts of the game that I do like and can manage, although I am being a little harsh on the puzzles only because I'm not a puzzle person, and these puzzles are not that intense, so they're not really that big of a deal. Just wanted to note it for your sake. I already feel like I'm talking about this game way too much, and that's why I gave the caveat in the beginning that maybe you want to just play this game yourself, because I already feel like I'm leaving way too little for surprise here. So I'll just say that I think the gameplay is pretty tight and solid, but occasionally I find these moments of chaos where there's just no way to parry quick enough to dodge all of these attacks rather frustrating, but thankfully these moments are few and far in between. Now, I'm not usually a pixel art person. I don't dislike the style, but I also don't gravitate towards it. However, I will say that I found myself enjoying it quite a bit more as I've gotten older, and I just love this game's style. I think it's gorgeous. In one section, it's bright and colorful, like in the Gear Village. In another section, it's dark and gloomy, like in the starting section of Downtown. Little visual effects too are a highlight for me, as there's a flair to Alma's parrying, and even the way she jumps and you see the subtle echo of where she was following her. This of course to cue that she has jumped a decent distance. Now, I'm not gonna pretend like I know a lot about pixel art or art design in general, but I can tell you that again, I just loved the vibe here. Now, since there's no voice acting here, the sound needs to do a lot of the heavy lifting with the visuals, and I don't think you'll be disappointed here either. I loved the music of this game. I think it had a nice rhythm, it flowed well from area to area, and even up until the end. I found myself humming along to all the tracks. Again, I don't know much about music arrangement or accompaniment, but I know enough to know I liked it and it complemented the game atmosphere quite well. The thing about these Zelda-like Metroidvania type games is that I find myself kind of losing interest towards the end of the game. Now, I found the premise of this game and the way that it just constantly rewards you with new tools and new ways of getting around super rewarding at all times, and how it just lets you use these abilities constantly throughout the game as you acquire them, like the double hook shot, for example. I think the problem comes with these kind of games is where it gets too long in the tooth. Like a lot of recent Zelda games for me, they get a little too long in the tooth and you start following the same pattern of just getting a new thing and a new dungeon, and then you go to the next dungeon and fight the next thing, and oh, you got to go to this thing to get that thing. But I think the best way that I've found that I've enjoyed these games is when they're a smaller experience like this, because there's constantly that reward for always getting through the dungeon, getting through the boss, but you're also using it throughout the rest of the game. So again, like the double hook shot or even the spinning blade. And another thing again that I enjoyed about this game is the fact that I said before, you can play it in so many different ways. There are so many ways to kind of cheat around or speed run this game in a way where it makes it so simple to just be able to just hit a couple of different points and then get to the end game. And that's impressive. And I always appreciate, and I said this about other games like The Outer Worlds, for example, where it allows you to not necessarily exploit the game, but use the game mechanics to kind of get around certain aspects of the game so that way you can kind of propel yourself to the end game before maybe your counterpart or maybe somebody else may have gotten there. It makes getting the platinum trophy like I did a lot easier and obviously a lot more fun, because there's so many different ways that I can engage with how the game is structured or go about the different dungeons in different orders by using specific pieces of gear. I say all of that to say that I loved Unsighted. It took me some time to play it, but I love this game and I found it super compelling and interesting. It was a great deal of fun, and part of the impetus, if you will, for this video is that, as I just mentioned, is I hunted for my platinum trophy. I found only a handful of videos or guides referencing or talking about this game, and I thought that was a damn shame because this game deserves better. I'm pretty sure it might still be on Game Pass, but if it's not going to be that expensive to jump into. So there's no reason really to not give it a shot, at the very least, if you're looking for something to play that's going to be quick and you don't have to go as deep as I did. But I think that's enough. I've already talked way too much about the game. I think the rest should be explored for itself. So for now, I leave the world of Unsighted, or at least the decision, in your hands to go forth or not. But thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you on a more consistent basis, and maybe this will be the start of it, or maybe this will be the end of it. I don't know. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you all soon.